The stale air of my childhood bedroom hit me first, thick with a scent that was achingly familiar but deeply wrong, Madison's signature gardenia perfume. Cloying and artificial, assaulting my senses in a space that used to smell of old books, the faint trace of charcoal dust from my architecture sketches, and the lavender linen spray I favored. I stumbled over my olive green duffel bag in the doorway, the worn canvas hitting the polished hardwood floor with a dull thud that echoed the sudden, heavy beat of my heart. My name is Avery, and I'd spent the last 9 months immersed in architectural studies in Florence, Italy. It was a dream opportunity, a chance to finally focus on the passion that had quietly burned within me for years, a passion I often felt was overlooked in the busy, demanding world of my family. Coming home was supposed to be a joyful surprise, a reunion with my parents, and most importantly, with Ryan, my fiancé. We had talked endlessly about this moment, planning our wedding, discussing the small architecture and design firm we dreamed of starting together. But standing here, in what was once undeniably my room, something felt fundamentally off. Horribly, irrevocably off. Getting back had been a blur of planes, train rides, and a jet lag that settled deep in my bones. The taxi dropped me off at the end of the long, winding driveway, just as dusk began to paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. The old colonial house, with its imposing white columns and sweeping front porch, looked just as I remembered it, solid and elegant, a symbol of our family's established place in the community. I'd wanted to surprise them, slipping in quietly, announcing my arrival with a hug rather than a phone call. I still had my key. The heavy oak door swung inward with a familiar groan. "Hello," I called out tentatively, my voice tight with anticipation. Only silence answered back through the grand, empty foyer, a silence that felt unnatural in a house usually bustling with activity. A faint classical melody drifted from the direction of the living room, but no one appeared. I dragged my bag towards the staircase, its polished banister cool beneath my hand. My steps echoed on the wood. Everything looked the same, yet subtly different. A new vase on the hall table, different artwork on the landing. Small, almost imperceptible changes that hinted at life continuing here without me. Reaching the second floor, I turned towards my bedroom, located at the end of the hall, overlooking the sprawling back garden. My hand was already reaching for the doorknob when the scent hit me. Gardenia. Strong, sweet, suffocating. It wasn't my scent, it was Madison's. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. Had she been house-sitting? Was she just using my room for a night or two? I pushed the door open. The sight stole my breath. My room was unrecognizable. The walls, once a vibrant teal that I'd painstakingly chosen when I was 16, a color that always felt bold and creative, were now a calming, sterile beige. My cluttered bookshelves, once overflowing with my chaotic collection of well-loved novels, dog-eared art books, and thick architectural texts, were neatly organized, displaying carefully curated minimalist decor I'd never seen smooth ceramic bowls, a stack of identical cream-colored journals, a single potted succulent. A rolled yoga mat lay in the corner where my worn armchair used to be, the one with the faded floral print where I spent hours sketching or lost in a book. This wasn't just someone using my room temporarily. It felt like my presence had been meticulously erased, my identity scrubbed away and replaced with something serene, organized, and utterly generic, something Madison. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden silence of my shock. I stepped fully into the alien space. These weren't just Madison's clothes spilling from the closet. It looked like her entire life had moved in, unpacked, and settled. Her delicate silk scarves were draped over hangers, her sleek running shoes lined up by the door, her array of expensive creams and perfumes crowding my old dresser, pushing my few remaining trinkets to the back. It wasn't just an inconvenience, it felt like a calculated invasion. This wasn't temporary. I sank onto the unfamiliar cushion on the window seat, the smooth, cool fabric a stark contrast to the rush of heat flooding my face. My gaze fell on the bedside table, now clear except for a single stack of design books, Ryan's favorites, volumes on minimalist design and sustainable architecture that we had devoured together, discussing concepts, arguing points, dreaming of the future. The sight of them here in Madison's curated space sent a fresh wave of sickening unease through me. Why were his books here? tucked inside one of the books, a thick volume on modern Italian architecture. A cruel irony, given where I'd been, I noticed a small, dark object half hidden beneath the dust jacket. A flash drive. Curiosity warred with a growing dread as I picked it up. It looked like Ryan's flash drive, the one he used for work, sleek and metallic. Why would his work flash drive be here, in Madison's newly claimed territory, tucked away in a book? With trembling fingers, I plugged it into my old laptop, the familiar hum and whir a comforting sound in the terrifying silence of the room. The screen flickered to life, displaying the contents of the drive. Folders, documents, names. I navigated through them, my breath catching in my throat. One folder was labeled Italy Project. My heart gave a tiny, hopeful leap. Maybe he'd been saving research for me, things he'd found related to my studies. I clicked it open. It wasn't architectural plans or research papers. It was photos, hundreds of them. Photos of Ryan and Madison, smiling, laughing, holding hands, kissing. My blood ran cold, then boiled. The dates marked moments I was still in Florence, diligently sketching cathedrals and learning about vaulted ceilings, convinced he was missing me, counting down the days until my return. A weekend getaway upstate, captured in dozens of smiling selfies by a waterfall, their arms around each other. A fancy restaurant dinner, their heads close together, sharing a bottle of wine, laughing conspiratorially. A quiet morning walk in the park I thought was my spot with Ryan, holding hands, sharing an ice cream cone, leaning against the ancient oak tree where he had first told me he loved me. The photos were intimate, undeniable. Each click of the mouse was a hammer blow to my heart. My breath hitched, a choked sob catching in my throat, but I swallowed it down. Then I saw another folder, the venture. Inside were emails, spreadsheets, legal documents. Not about our planned business, the small architecture and design firm Ryan and I had pored over for months before I left, discussing names and branding and potential clients, sketching logos on napkins. This was a new venture, between Ryan and Madison. And it wasn't just a business plan, it was tied to restructuring my trust fund, the one my late grandmother, Evelyn, had left me. A substantial amount, meant to provide me with financial security and the freedom to pursue my passions, set to unlock when I turned 30 next year. The documents outlined how funds could be redirected, loopholes exploited, my control over the money minimized or even eliminated. It wasn't just an affair, it was a calculated plot. My own sister, the golden child, and the man I was going to marry, systematically dismantling my future, using the very money meant to secure it. The realization hit me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. The affair, the photos, the utter betrayal of our relationship that was devastating enough. A cruel twist of the knife in a heart I had offered him completely. But the financial conspiracy, the cold, deliberate planning to steal my inheritance, the casual cruelty evident in the emails. It was monstrous. It wasn't just betrayal, it was theft. From the man I was going to marry, from the sister I'd grown up with, the person I had always, despite our differences, believed loved me in her own way. The room didn't just smell of gardenia and sterile beige. It reeked of deceit and calculated malice. Tears welled in my eyes again, hot and stinging, blurring the text on the screen, but I blinked them back fiercely. Not here, not now. The pain was a raw, gaping wound, but beneath it, a cold, hard fury began to simmer. They thought they were so clever, so safe with me thousands of miles away, preoccupied with Renaissance architecture. They thought I wouldn't notice, wouldn't care, wouldn't understand. They were wrong. Terribly, utterly wrong. The sound of the front door opening downstairs jolted me back to the present, the familiar voices of my parents echoing up the grand stairwell. "Avery, is that you? Ryan, did you hear something?" My mother, Alina, called up, her voice perfectly modulated, like a carefully tuned instrument, always poised, always masking whatever lay beneath the surface. I scrambled to close the laptop, shoving the flash drive deep into the pocket of my jeans, the plastic edges pressing uncomfortably against my thigh, a tangible reminder of the poison I had just ingested. I smoothed my face, forcing it into a semblance of calm, a mask of pleasant surprise and slight travel weariness. "Yeah, Mom just got in, came home a little early." A moment later, she appeared at the top of the stairs, looking as polished as if she'd just stepped out of a magazine, her silver hair perfectly coiffed. her cashmere sweater immaculate despite the long day. She carried herself with an air of effortless grace and controlled authority that always made me feel slightly rumpled and out of place in comparison. "Darling, we weren't expecting you until next week." Oh, the surprise worked. She offered a bright, but somehow strained, smile, her eyes scanning my face, searching for something. "We'd planned a welcome back dinner for next Saturday." "I know," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "But I finished my final project early and just couldn't wait." "That's wonderful, dear." She paused, her gaze flicking towards the open door of my room, or rather, Madison's room now. "Paisley?" She stopped herself, a tiny, almost imperceptible flicker of something I couldn't quite name: annoyance, discomfort. Crossing her features before she corrected herself, her voice smooth again. "Madison has been using your room while hers is being painted. We thought it was just temporary, of course. A few weeks, maybe." Of course, the lie hung in the air, heavy and cloying like Madison's perfume. My room hadn't just been used, it had been remade, stripped of my history, claimed as her own. "Oh, right," I managed, forcing a smile that felt brittle like thin ice over deep, dark water. "It looks different. Very beige." Elinor chuckled, a light social sound. "Yes, well, Madison has such an eye for decor, doesn't she? Very calming. Where are your bags? Let's get you settled." "They're just downstairs," I said, gesturing vaguely. "Where's Ryan?" I tried calling him from the airport, but he didn't pick up. My signal was spotty. Another lie, easily told. I hadn't called him. I hadn't wanted to speak to him until I knew what was happening, until I had a moment to breathe through the suffocating realization of his betrayal. "He's here, in the study with your father, going over some investment plans," she chirped, her eyes sparkling with what looked like genuine pleasure. She always approved of Ryan, his ambition, his family name, his polished charm. "They've become quite the pair while you were away, discussing business, golf, the state of the market. It's just lovely how well they connect." Lovely. My stomach twisted. They connect over stealing from me. As if summoned by his name, Ryan emerged from the study then, followed closely by my father, Robert. Ryan's smile, the one that used to make my heart race, now felt like a carefully constructed mask, just like his planned future with my sister. He looked slightly flushed, perhaps from discussing illegal activities or perhaps just from being caught off guard by my unexpected arrival. "Avery, you're back. Wow, you look great. Tired, but great. Italy suits you." He moved towards me, his arms open for a hug, the picture of the surprised, loving fiancé. "Surprise," I said, my voice flat despite my attempt at cheerfulness. I stepped into his embrace, briefly, stiffening slightly as I inhaled the faint, sickeningly familiar scent of Madison's gardenia perfume clinging to his crisp dress shirt. A scent that now felt like a brand, a mark of their shared deceit. "We weren't expecting you," he said, pulling back, his hands resting on my shoulders, his thumbs rubbing small circles against my skin. The gesture, once comforting, now felt predatory. "What happened? Was everything okay?" "Everything's fine," I lied smoothly. "Just finished up a bit early, decided to catch the first flight home, figured I'd surprise everyone." My gaze flickered towards Madison, who had drifted out from the kitchen then, effortlessly graceful in a simple silk blouse and tailored trousers. She was wearing my favorite cashmere sweater, the one I'd bought in a tiny boutique in Rome, the one I'd saved for special occasions. It looked perfect on her, of course. Everything always did. "Avery, welcome home." Her smile was wide, practiced, but her eyes flickered towards Ryan, then back to me, a tiny tremor in her practiced composure. She knew, or at least she suspected something was wrong with my sudden arrival. "Thanks, Madison," I said, holding her gaze, letting my eyes linger on the sweater. "Nice sweater, it looks familiar, like the one I bought in Rome." A tiny flush rose on her cheeks, but she recovered instantly, a little too quickly. "Oh, it's old. One of Mom's, I think, must have gotten it ages ago. You probably have one just like it." Another lie, effortless. Years of practice, I supposed. The rest of the afternoon and evening was a carefully orchestrated performance. My parents asked about Italy, about my studies, about my flight, their questions polite and surface level, never venturing too deep. Ryan was overly attentive, asking about my plans, suggesting we go out to dinner just the two of us soon, talking about the wedding, about our future. Madison hovered, offering me tea, showing me the updates. she'd made to the house while I was gone, including, apparently, completely redecorating my room into her personal sanctuary. I played the role of the happy returnee, the slightly tired but excited daughter and fiancé. I smiled, I nodded, I made appropriate small talk, my answers deliberately vague or diverting. Inside, the initial shock was giving way to a cold, hard resolve. The ice was forming around my heart, a protective layer against the pain, hardening into something cold and sharp. They thought they were so clever, so safe with me thousands of miles away, preoccupied with Renaissance architecture and pasta. They thought I wouldn't notice, wouldn't care, wouldn't understand. They were wrong. Terribly, utterly wrong. That evening, sitting through dinner at the large mahogany table, the air thick with the scent of roasted chicken and lies, I watched them. Madison, radiant and composed in my sweater, detailing her latest volunteer project at the Children's Hospital with an angelic smile. Ryan, playing the part of the devoted fiancé, his hand resting on my knee under the table, while his eyes seemed to constantly dart towards Madison. Exchanging micro-expressions that spoke volumes, I now understood. My parents, seemingly oblivious to the undercurrents, or perhaps, I thought darkly, entirely complicit, chatting about the upcoming country club gala, Ryan's promising business deals, the state of the stock market. Their shared laughter echoed in the formal dining room, a discordant sound in the symphony of my pain and anger. My engagement ring felt like a brand on my finger, a physical symbol of a lie I was living, a future that had been stolen before it even began. They had no idea I held the blueprints to their carefully constructed lies in my pocket. "Darling, you're so quiet tonight," my mother said, her gaze sweeping over me, a slight frown touching her perfectly smooth brow. "Still on Italy time? Or is Florence truly so captivating it's rendered you speechless?" "Something like that," I said, taking a slow sip of my wine, letting the cool liquid coat my tongue, a small comfort in the suffocating atmosphere. "Just a lot to take in coming home, so much has changed." I let my gaze drift pointedly towards Madison. "Of course," she said smoothly, picking up her fork again, "it's been quite a few months. But Madison has made the house feel so refreshed, hasn't she? Her touch is so calming." "She certainly has," I agreed, meeting Madison's eyes across the table, holding her gaze a fraction too long, letting my own eyes convey a message she couldn't misinterpret. "Especially my room, it looks very different, very beige, very you." Madison laughed again, a light, musical sound that grated on my nerves like fingernails on a chalkboard. "Oh, I hope you don't mind, Avery. My room was just unbearable with the fumes from the paint. Yours is just so lovely and spacious, and I needed a quiet place to focus on my charity work. It was only temporary, of course, just until the paint smell fades." "It is now," I said, letting a hint of something sharper edge my tone, just enough for them to hear, but not enough to raise suspicion in my father, who seemed genuinely lost in conversation with Ryan about the market. "It used to feel more mine before you moved in." The table fell silent for a beat, the only sound the clinking of cutlery. Ryan cleared his throat, sensing the sudden tension. "So, Avery, enough about beige walls and paint fumes. Tell us about Florence. Did you see the Duomo? Was it everything you hoped? Did you manage to sketch the Ponte Vecchio?" I smiled, a genuine, cold smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Oh, Ryan, it was spectacular. So many layers of history, so much buried beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. You really have to dig deep to see the full picture, to understand the true foundation." I held his gaze, letting the double meaning hang in the air, watching a flicker of unease cross his face before he masked it with a forced smile. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, reaching for his water glass. After dinner, feigning tiredness from my long journey, I excused myself and retreated to my Madison's room. I locked the door behind me, the click of the latch a small victory. I pulled out the flash drive and my laptop, spreading the documents and photos across the unfamiliar duvet cover. I spent hours poring over the files again, the pit in my stomach growing deeper with each discovery. The financial documents confirmed my initial fears. A sophisticated scheme was underway to divert my trust funds into the shell corporation, funneling money directly to Madison and Ryan under the guise of this new venture. The emails were even more chillingly explicit, detailing not just their affair but their cynical planning, their mocking discussions about my naivete. their anticipation of the wealth they would control, their casual dismissal of my dreams and my future. Ryan to Madison, subject. Ray, trust fund plan. Almost there. Eleanor is being a little difficult with the paperwork and asking too many questions about the ward details, but she understands the need for discretion for the family's reputation. Avery's too focused on her sketches and gelato in Italy to notice anything happening back here. She wouldn't know the difference anyway. Honestly, she's clueless about this kind of thing. Madison to Ryan's subject. Ray, the venture progress. Perfect. It will be so much easier once the funds are consolidated under our control. My mother assures me Avery's access can be easily restricted once the restructuring is complete. The ward clause gives us leverage. She's always been so, impractical with money anyway. Remember how she almost lost that scholarship because she forgot to submit the application? This is for her own good, really. We'll manage it much better. Ryan to Madison, subject. Missing her, Avery emailed, going on and on about some church architecture. Adorable how she thinks this design firm idea is still happening with us. Lol, can't wait for you to be here permanently. This room is great, by the way. Much better than my old place. Reading their words, seeing their casual cruelty, their utter lack of remorse or even basic human decency. The pain was still there, a dull throb beneath the surface, but the cold fury intensified, hardening into a diamond-like core of resolve. They weren't just betraying me. They were justifying it, casting me as the simpleton who needed their help, the impractical dreamer who didn't deserve her inheritance. They thought they were untouchable, moving my things out, erasing my presence, stealing my future, all while I was miles away, believing in their love and loyalty. They were wrong, terribly, utterly wrong. I reached out to Megan first, my old college roommate and a cybersecurity whiz who now worked for a major tech firm. We spoke for nearly an hour, my voice low, recounting everything I had found, the affair, the financial plot, the chilling emails. Megan, I need your help. I need every scrap of digital evidence you can find. Deleted messages, hidden files, cloud backups, anything that connects them and shows the depth of their planning. They've been at this for months, maybe longer. Avery, that's beyond messed up, Megan said, her voice full of genuine shock and anger that vibrated even through the phone line. Your own sister and fiancé conspiring against you and stealing your inheritance? That's criminal, literally. Of course, I'll help. Send me everything you have, the flash drive contents, anything else you can find. Consider me your personal digital detective on a mission for justice. Next, I called Liam, my distant cousin on my father's side. The quiet one in the family who worked in forensic accounting for a reputable firm downtown. He wasn't as flamboyant as some of our relatives, preferring numbers and quiet analysis to social events, which made him perfect for this. He listened patiently, his initial polite interest turning into focused attention as I explained the financial documents from the flash drive, the trust, the planned rerouting of funds, the shell corporation. Avery, this is serious, he said gravely, his voice calm and measured, a stark contrast to my inner turmoil. Tampering with a trust fund is a complex legal issue, and the amounts you're describing. This isn't a minor offense. And you're right, diverting those funds in this manner would require someone with intimate knowledge of the trust structure and access to the relevant accounts. Someone close to the family, someone potentially involved in the trust's administration. Someone like my mother? I asked, the words tasting like ash, but I needed to hear it from him. Liam was silent for a long moment, carefully considering his words. Based on the preliminary documents you have and the nature of the transfers involved, it's a definite possibility. Accessing and manipulating trust funds requires specific authority. I can't say definitively without seeing the official trust documents themselves and a full accounting of all transactions, but the pattern you've uncovered strongly suggests a high level of coordination, involving someone with significant access. The Gala, I said, a plan forming in my mind, solidifying my resolve. My parents' 30th anniversary gala is in 2 weeks. It's a huge event. Everyone will be there. The family, their closest friends, their business associates, Ryan's partners, people he needs to impress. Madison's social circle. And you want to, Liam prompted gently, understanding dawning in his voice. I want to expose them, I said, the coldness in my voice surprising even me. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about truth, about stripping away the layers of deceit and revealing the rot beneath the polished surface of my family's life. All of them. I want everyone to see what they've done, who they really are. Liam didn't try to dissuade me. He knew my family, their obsession with appearances, the social cost of scandal. He understood the magnitude of what I was contemplating. Okay, Avery, what do you need from me? Full financial forensic analysis. Documentation that proves fraud, tracing the money trail. Everything you can find about that trust, I said, focusing on the core issue. Every detail about how it's structured, who has access, who the beneficiaries are supposed to be, and any hard evidence linking my mother to the diversion of funds. I need irrefutable proof. Over the next 2 weeks, working in secret, communicating mostly through encrypted messages and late-night calls, Megan and Liam became my lifeline, my co-conspirators in truth. I spent my days maintaining the facade at home, participating in stilted conversations, observing Madison and Ryan with a detached, almost clinical eye, gathering what little additional information I could without raising alarm bells. At night, I delved into the evidence Megan and Liam uncovered. Megan's digital forensics were astounding. She unearthed thousands of messages between Ryan and Madison from their various platforms, detailing not just the progression of their affair, but their increasingly audacious planning. Their cynical discussions about my naivete, their thinly veiled contempt for my dreams, their greedy anticipation of the wealth they would soon control were laid bare. She found flight records for their secret trips, multiple hotel bookings under different names, even coded messages hidden in shared online calendars, planning their rendezvous while I was supposedly miles away, safely out of sight and out of mind. Madison to Ryan, hidden in calendar note for my birthday. Happy birthday, Kay, meet me at our spot at 7. All systems go for phase 2 next month. We'll never see it coming. Liam's work on the financial side was equally damning. He confirmed that the new venture was indeed largely a shell corporation, a front for laundering the trust funds. He traced preliminary transfers, showing substantial amounts of money moving from accounts connected to my mother to the shell corporation, which then funneled money to accounts held by Madison and Ryan. The paper trail was convoluted, but, with Liam's expertise, undeniable. And he found something else, something buried deep in the trust documentation that explained the ward status and hinted at the deeper family secret. A clause that referred to me not as a direct beneficiary in the same way as my future siblings might be, a moot point, as I was an only child, but the wording was telling. But as a ward of the family, with a specific amount designated for my care and future, but with the ultimate distribution contingent on certain conditions. Conditions that my mother, as one of the trustees, seemed to have the power to interpret and, crucially, manipulate. It hinted at a history the family had wanted to obscure, a reason for the ward status that went beyond mere adoption, something tied to my biological origins and my grandmother's specific instructions. Liam's analysis also revealed that the person named as having facilitated my placement as a ward with Evelyn, and who held some distant oversight in the original trust planning, was a Sarah Jenkins. The same name he had noted was tied to a property that had once belonged to my grandmother's side of the family. The tension in the house was palpable during those 2 weeks. I maintained my facade, polite and seemingly unaware, observing them with a detached, almost clinical eye. Ryan was clearly nervous, overly solicitous, asking about my architectural studies, trying to steer conversations to safe, familiar topics about the wedding, our future, the business we would build together. It was sickeningly ironic. Madison avoided eye contact, flinching slightly whenever I spoke, her usual effortless confidence replaced by a subtle, gnawing unease. My mother watched me constantly, a faint frown line etched between her perfectly shaped brows, as if she sensed something was profoundly wrong but couldn't pinpoint what. She attributed my quietness to jet lag or post-Italy melancholy. Let her think that. One evening, walking past the study, I overheard my mother talking to my father in hushed, urgent tones. The final papers for the trust restructuring. We need to finalize them before Avery's 30th birthday next month. It's essential for the venture to be fully operational. Securing the funds. My father's voice was lower, hesitant, but I caught fragments of his reply. Are you sure this is wise, Aliner? What if she finds out? What about Evelyn's intentions? Your sister's wishes were clear. My mother's voice sharpened, taking on a brittle, dangerous edge. My sister is gone, Robert, and her wishes were naive, impractical. This is the best way to ensure the family's prosperity, to secure our future, Madison's future. Avery doesn't need that much money. She's impractical. She just wastes it on artistic nonsense. This is the responsible approach. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden silence of the hall outside the study door. Her sister, my grandmother Evelyn's sister, Sarah Jenkins, the pieces were starting to fit, forming a picture far more complex and disturbing than I had initially imagined. My mother wasn't just complicit. She was actively involved, manipulating the trust, disregarding her own sister's explicit intentions, driven by resentment and a twisted sense of what was best for the family, her family, which apparently didn't fully include me. I retreated to my room, locking the door, the weight of the revelations pressing down on me. They weren't just stealing money, they were stealing my history, manipulating my grandmother's legacy, redefining my place in the family to suit their narrative and their greed. The cold fury deepened, solidifying into an unshakable resolve. The gala wasn't just an opportunity, it was a necessity. They had built their lies in public, I would tear them down the same way. The night of my parents' 30th anniversary gala arrived like a storm cloud. I had personally brewed and deliberately steered towards the sparkling country club ballroom. The room was a picture of opulent celebration, decorated in gold and white, filled with hundreds of my parents' closest friends, esteemed colleagues, and extended family members, all gathered to celebrate a seemingly picture-perfect marriage, a pillar of the community. Crystal chandeliers dripped light, reflecting off champagne flutes and expensive jewelry. The air hummed with polite conversation, laughter, and the soft strains of a live jazz band. I arrived with Ryan, a forced smile plastered on my face, my hand linked through his arm. I wore the dress I'd bought in Italy, a vibrant, daring red that felt like a declaration of war in this sea of pastel silks and conservative suits. It was a statement piece, designed to draw the eye. Ryan, looking impossibly handsome in his tailored tuxedo, played his part flawlessly, his smile unwavering, his eyes scanning the room, shaking hands, accepting congratulations. He seemed oblivious to the impending storm, or perhaps he was just a master of denial. Madison, stunning and poised in a flowing blue gown that complemented her fair skin and dark hair, mingled effortlessly, surrounded by her usual admiring crowd. She was the golden child tonight, basking in the glow of adoration, the picture of grace and success. My parents, Aliner and Robert, stood near the entrance, beaming, playing the part of the gracious hosts, the happy couple celebrating 3 decades of wedded bliss. As we moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations on our engagement and my return, I kept my expression pleasant, my answers brief. I noted where key people were Ryan's business partners he needed to impress, the family lawyer involved in the trust, members of the country club board, my parents' closest friends who adored Madison. Megan was hidden near the AV booth, giving me a subtle nod. Liam was positioned near the back, blending into the crowd, a USB drive containing the meticulously organized financial evidence tucked safely in his inner jacket pocket, ready to step in if needed. My own flash drive was in my small clutch bag, along with printed copies of the most damning emails, a physical backup. As my father, Robert, finally stepped up to the microphone to give his toast, raising a champagne flute, the room quieted. This was my moment, my cue. "If you'll indulge me," I said, stepping forward slightly, my voice clear and steady, amplified by the microphone I took from my father's slightly surprised hand. The small sound cut through the last lingering whispers of polite chatter. "Before Dad gives his toast, I'd also like to say a few words about family, about trust, and about transparency." A hush fell over the crowd, conversations trailing off completely. Hundreds of eyes turned towards me. My mother's smile faltered, replaced by a look of utter surprise, then confusion, then suspicion. Ryan's hand, which had been resting lightly on my back, tensed, his fingers digging into my skin. Madison, across the room, stopped laughing, her glass halfway to her lips, her eyes fixed on me, a dawning apprehension on her face. I recently returned home from studying abroad, I began, my gaze sweeping over the silent ballroom, letting the weight of the moment sink in. And as you all know, coming home after a long time away can be full of surprises, some pleasant, some less so. Behind me, the large screen, usually used for photo montages, flickered to life, casting a harsh white light across the room. Megan, hidden by the AV booth, was on cue. Some surprises are minor, I continued, my voice calm, almost conversational, a stark contrast to the turmoil churning inside me. My gaze settled for a moment on Madison, then on Ryan standing rigid beside me. Like finding out your room has been completely redecorated, your personal belongings packed away, and your space claimed as someone else's sanctuary. Murmurs went through the crowd, a few uncomfortable chuckles from people who probably thought this was just an opening joke about sibling rivalry. But some surprises are significantly more impactful, more hurtful, more criminal. The screen changed, displaying the meticulously compiled timeline Megan had created photos of Ryan and Madison together. Smiling, intimate, overlaid with text showing the exact dates I was supposedly in Florence, blissfully unaware. Below the photos, emails appeared, scrolling down the screen in stark white text on a black background. Conversations between Ryan and Madison, planning their secret trips, expressing their affection, confirming their affair in explicit detail. Gasps erupted through the ballroom, a collective inhalation of shock. A woman in the front row dropped her champagne glass, the sound echoing in the sudden silence. My mother's face went utterly white, her eyes wide with horror, her hand flying to her mouth. My father stared at the screen, then at Ryan, his jaw slack, his face a mask of confusion and dawning horror. Ryan muttered, his voice low and furious, his grip tightening painfully on my arm, "Avery, what in God's name are you doing? Stop this." "Exposing the truth, Ryan," I said, pulling my arm away from his grasp, my voice hardening, amplified by the microphone. "This isn't just about an affair. This is about trust. Not just trust between people, but financial trust." The screen changed again, displaying the complex financial diagrams and transfer records Liam had meticulously documented. Arrows showed substantial amounts of money moving from accounts linked to my mother's name to accounts connected to a shell corporation Liam had identified as a front, which then funneled money to accounts held by Madison and Ryan. Figures flashed on the screen, sums that represented not just my future, but years of my grandmother's careful planning. "It seems," I said, my voice dripping ice, letting the full weight of the revelation land, "that my inheritance, the funds my grandmother Evelyn left specifically for my future, were being systematically rerouted, diverted for a new venture between my sister and my fiancé. A venture, it appears, built on fraud and deception." More gasps, louder this time. Whispers spread like wildfire through the crowd, a buzzing sound of outrage and disbelief. My father stared at the screen, then at my mother, his face a mask of confusion and dawning horror. My mother's eyes darted nervously around the room, her carefully constructed composure shattered, her hands fluttering uselessly. "And speaking of trust and complicated family matters," I continued, my voice unwavering, pulling out my own flash drive and inserting it into the nearby laptop connected to the projector. The screen now showed scanned legal documents, not the main trust document, but annexes and supporting papers Liam had found, highlighting specific clauses. When I dug into the details of the trust, with the help of a forensic accountant, I found some other interesting paperwork. Documents related to my own history. Documents that show I wasn't simply adopted into this family, not in the way everyone assumed, but was placed here as a ward, with specific instructions tied to the trust. Instructions that seem to have been disregarded, and documents that mention a name I didn't recognize. The document on the screen highlighted the name Sarah Jenkins and the clause about my placement as a ward. A woman near the back of the room, who had been listening intently, her face pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and recognition, gasped softly. She looked strikingly like an older version of the few photos I had seen of my grandmother Evelyn in her youth. My mother stepped forward, her voice trembling with a mixture of fury, panic, and something else I couldn't quite decipher, fear. "Avery, stop this. You don't understand. You're ruining everything. This is private. You can't just..." "Understand what, Mom?" I cut her off, my voice rising slightly, letting the years of feeling unseen, misunderstood, and now utterly betrayed pour out. Understand that you and Madison and Ryan were stealing from me. Understand that you were manipulating my grandmother's wishes. Understand that my own family was plotting against me while I was thousands of miles away. I turned to face the crowd fully, my gaze sweeping over the stunned faces of people who thought they knew our perfect family, the Hastings, pillars of the community, a model of success and virtue. Oh, I think I'm starting to understand perfectly. Chaos erupted. The carefully maintained facade of the gala shattered like dropped crystal. Shouting, crying, furious whispers filled the air. People stood frozen in shock. Others were already whispering into their phones, calling lawyers, calling the police, or just spreading the gossip. My parents were immediately surrounded by a crush of shocked guests, demanding explanations about the trust, about my status, about the financial fraud. Ryan, his face ashen, his eyes wide with panic, finally found his voice, though it was strained, desperate. Avery, we can explain. Please, this isn't the whole story. We can fix this. Save it, Ryan, I said, my voice devoid of emotion, watching his carefully constructed world crumble in real time. Your explanation isn't worth my time, or anyone else's. Madison, her beautiful blue gown seeming ludicrously out of place amidst the unfolding disaster, was crying openly, mascara streaming down her face. Her perfect composure was gone, replaced by raw, unadulterated distress. Avery, I love him. We didn't mean for any of this to happen like this. Didn't mean to get caught. I finished for her, my voice cold and sharp, the years of unspoken rivalry and resentment bubbling to the surface. Didn't mean to steal from your own sister. Didn't mean to erase me from my own home, from my own future, just so you could have everything you wanted. I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked away from the pandemonium, my red dress a defiant splash of color against the chaos. The sound of shouting, crying, accusations, and demands for explanations echoed behind me as I made my way towards the exit. As I reached the door, feeling a strange mix of exhilaration and utter emptiness, the woman from the back of the room, the one who looked like my grandmother, approached me. She was visibly shaken, her face etched with sorrow and recognition, but there was a quiet strength in her eyes that drew me in. Avery, my name is Sarah Jenkins. She extended a trembling hand, her grip surprisingly strong when I took it. I'm your grandmother Evelyn's sister. Her voice was gentle but firm, cutting through the noise. There's a lot you need to know about the trust, and about your mother, your real mother. I took her hand, her touch unfamiliar yet comforting. The chaos behind me seemed to fade into the background. I said, my voice barely a whisper, I'm finally ready to listen. Outside the country club, the night air was cool and clean, a welcome contrast to the suffocating atmosphere of the ballroom. The sound of sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing closer. Megan and Liam met me by my car, their faces a mixture of relief and concern. Avery, are you okay? Megan asked, her eyes wide. That was incredible. And awful. The police are on their way. I don't know what I am, I admitted, feeling the adrenaline drain away, leaving me shaky and numb. But I'm not pretending anymore. Liam nodded. The evidence is solid, Avery. They're in serious trouble, especially Ryan with the fraud charges. He glanced back at the country club. Your parents, that revelation about the trust and your status, it hit them hard. And Madison. I know, I said, my voice flat. I saw. Sarah approached us then, having followed me out. Liam recognized her. Miss Jenkins, I'm Liam. We spoke about the trust. Yes, Liam. Thank you for your help, she said, her gaze fixed on me. Avery, I understand if you need time, but I want to tell you everything. Tonight. I looked at the flashing lights approaching the country club, the symbol of the life I had just detonated. There was nothing left for me there. Okay, I said, taking a deep breath. Let's go. Over the next few days, the carefully constructed world of the Hastings family imploded publicly. The news of the Gala debacle and the subsequent investigations dominated local headlines and social media. Ryan was immediately put on leave from his job at the investment firm, facing serious charges of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy based on the irrefutable evidence Liam had compiled and shared with the authorities. Madison was questioned extensively by investigators, her role in the venture scrutinized, her name dragged through the mud. Her carefully crafted social media presence became a target of public condemnation. My parents, Elena and Robert, were facing a dual crisis: the legal fallout from the trust manipulation and the public humiliation of the scandal. Their carefully cultivated reputation in the community was in tatters. I spent those days mostly with Sarah. We met at her quiet, cozy house, a stark contrast to the grand formality of my childhood home. She was my grandmother Evelyn's younger sister, a woman who had lived a quieter life, working as a librarian, choosing books and community over social climbing. She confirmed the truth about my past, weaving a narrative that explained the ward status and my mother's resentment. My biological mother, Evelyn's daughter and Sarah's niece, was named Clara. She had been young, barely out of her teens, when she found herself in a difficult situation. The details were sparse. Sarah protected Clara's privacy, only saying it was a time of unforeseen circumstances and that Clara was not in a position to care for a child. Evelyn, my grandmother, a woman of immense strength and love, had stepped in. She couldn't openly raise me as her own daughter's child without causing a major scandal that would have devastated Clara and potentially ruined her future in a less understanding time. Adoption through traditional channels also presented complications, potentially revealing Clara's identity. Evelyn devised the ward arrangement as a way to keep you in the family, under her care, but with a degree of separation that protected Clara, Sarah explained, pouring us more tea. And she set up the trust specifically for you, Avery. It wasn't just a general inheritance. It was a dedicated fund to ensure your independence, your education, your ability to pursue your dreams without ever having to rely on anyone else's goodwill. She knew Elena could be difficult, controlling. Evelyn wanted to make sure you were secure, that you had the freedom she herself sometimes felt she lacked. Sarah herself was named in the trust as a distant overseer, someone who knew Evelyn's true intentions and was meant to step in if something went wrong. But she had been traveling extensively for work when Evelyn passed away unexpectedly. And by the time she returned, Elena had already taken control, interpreting the ward clause in ways Evelyn had never intended. Elena resented you from the start, Avery, Sarah said softly, her eyes, a clear, kind blue so different from my mother Elena's guarded gaze, filled with sympathy. She saw you not as a gift, but as an obligation, a complication, a secret she had to keep. And she resented the trust, the money that wasn't strictly theirs to control. She always felt you were a burden, a disruption to the perfect family image she cultivated. This explained so much. Madison's competitive streak, my mother's subtle criticisms, the feeling I always had of being slightly outside, not quite measuring up. It wasn't just my imagination. It was the carefully constructed reality of my upbringing. And Madison, Sarah continued, she grew up seeing your mother's resentment, perhaps feeling she had to compensate for it, had to be the perfect daughter, the one who truly belonged. She was under immense pressure from Elena to succeed, to marry well, to maintain the family's standing. I think she got caught up in that pressure and in Ryan's ambition. The truth settled over me, heavy but also strangely clarifying. It wasn't just about an affair or stolen money. It was about decades of simmering resentment, of a mother who saw me as a burden, a sister who was molded by that resentment and the pressure to be perfect, and a fiancé who saw an opportunity for easy wealth and social climbing. They had stolen money, yes, but they had also stolen my history, manipulated my grandmother's legacy, redefined my place in the family to suit their narrative and their greed. Ryan was facing serious legal repercussions. Liam kept me updated. The evidence was overwhelming, and Ryan's attempts to deny his involvement were futile against the digital and financial trails. Madison was facing a different kind of ruin, public shaming, social ostracism, and the potential for civil lawsuits related to the trust funds. My father, Robert, contacted me, his voice strained and full of regret. He hadn't known the full extent of Elena's manipulation of the trust or the depth of Ryan and Madison's scheme. He was devastated by the scandal and the damage to the family name, but also, I sensed, genuinely heartbroken by the pain I had endured. He asked to meet, but I wasn't ready yet. Days later, Madison texted again. Avery, please, I know you probably hate me, but can we talk, just us, please? I hesitated. The raw wound of her betrayal still ached, a dull throb beneath the surface. but Sarah's words about Madison being shaped by my mother's resentment about her own pressures echoed in my mind. Was there anything left between us? A tiny flicker of the childhood bond we once shared? Or had it been irrevocably broken? I decided to see. A part of me, a small, stubborn part, needed to understand, to hear it from her. I agreed, setting the terms. Neutral ground, a quiet coffee shop on the edge of town, far from the gilded cage of our childhood home, far from the prying eyes of the community that was now feasting on our downfall. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table, looking nothing like the poised, radiant Madison everyone knew. Her hair was pulled back messily in a ponytail, there was no makeup covering the dark circles under her eyes, and her clothes were simple, almost plain, a worn t-shirt and jeans, a far cry from her usual designer wardrobe. She looked small, defeated, fragile in a way I had never seen before. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice barely a whisper as I slid into the chair opposite her. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Why Madison?" I asked, cutting straight to the point, the question heavy with years of unspoken rivalry and the more recent, devastating betrayal. "Why Ryan? Why the trust? Why did you do this?" Her eyes welled up instantly, tears spilling onto her cheeks. I don't hate you, Avery, I never did." She twisted the napkin in her hands, shredding it into tiny pieces. "With Ryan, it just happened. He was here, you were gone, we were working together on that proposal he had. And then it just spiraled out of control. It felt easy, comfortable. Easy to betray your fiancé's sister." My voice was sharper than I intended. She flinched. "It wasn't like that at first. It was lonely, you were so far away, he was right here, and he seemed to understand me. In a way," she trailed off, her voice choked with tears. "But the money, that was Ryan. He saw the trust documents my mother had. He saw how much it was. He saw an opportunity. He convinced me it was smart, a way to build our future. He said you wouldn't even notice, that it was more than you needed anyway, that you were just going to waste it on sketches. And you believed him. The idea that she would so easily devalue my passion, my dreams, based on his words, stung as much as the theft itself." She finally looked up, her eyes, red-rimmed and filled with a raw, painful honesty I had never seen before, met mine. Part of me did. Another part didn't want to question him. He was so convincing. And Mom, she encouraged it. Not the affair, she didn't know about that initially. But the trust. She always talked about how Evelyn had been naive, how the money should be managed properly within the core family, how it was almost a mistake to leave you so much. She made me feel like it was our right to secure our family's future. "Our right to steal from me," I repeated, the concept still surreal. "Our right to correct a mistake," she said, the words clearly painful to admit, the echo of my mother's voice in her own. "She always made me feel like you were a complication, a burden, a reminder of things she didn't want to remember. She always pushed me to be perfect, to excel, to be everything you weren't. She said you were too impractical, too sensitive, too much like your grandmother's side of the family. It wasn't about hating you, Avery, not really. It was about trying to be enough for her, to feel like I truly belonged, like I wasn't just living in your shadow, inheriting your leftovers." Her words hung in the air, a confession of insecurity and a lifetime of maternal pressure. I looked at her, stripped of her perfect facade, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. I saw not just the betrayer, but a glimpse of the insecure girl beneath the polished exterior, shaped and warped by my mother's resentment and her own desperate need for approval. "Mom's in therapy," she offered, her voice quiet, picking at the shredded napkin pieces. "Dad, he's staying with a friend for now. He's devastated by everything, by Mom's part in it, by losing his perfect family." The door to the coffee shop chimed softly, and Sarah walked in, having agreed to meet me here afterwards. She stopped short, seeing us together, a look of surprise and gentle understanding on her face. "Oh, I can come back," she started, already beginning to turn. "Stay," I said quickly. "Please, it's okay." She joined us, sitting down and looking at both of us with a compassionate gaze that held no judgment. "I just signed the papers," she said, looking at me, her voice soft. "Legally acknowledging I'm your birth mother if you want them. It was a promise I made to Evelyn that if the truth ever came out, I would do right by you. That you would know who you are, where you come from. Does this mean you're moving back permanently?" Madison asked Sarah, her voice tentative, looking from me to Sarah, trying to understand this new dynamic. I bought a small house nearby, Sarah nodded, confirming the shift in her life. Not far from here, if that's okay with everyone, I want to be closer. My phone buzzed again on the table. Mom this time, a text. Avery, I saw the news about Sarah. There is so much I need to explain. I understand if you never forgive me, but please know I'm trying to change. The therapist says she's finally dealing with her own childhood trauma. I showed them the text. Madison read it, a sad, knowing smile on her face. She is trying, Madison said softly. The therapist says she's finally dealing with her own issues. Her own mother, Evelyn, was apparently very demanding, very critical. Mom always felt she wasn't good enough. Maybe that's where all this came from, her needing everything to be perfect. And me to be perfect. And you, Sarah, I asked, turning to her, needing to understand her part in all this, her story. Are you dealing with yours, with giving me up? Every day, she reached for my hand across the table, her touch warm and steady, anchoring me. It wasn't easy, it was the hardest decision of my life, but it was the only option at the time. It was what was best for Clara, for you, in that moment. But yes, I'm dealing with it. With the grief, the regret, the what-ifs. Starting with making amends to you, with being here, with telling you the truth, all of it. The morning light streamed through the large window of the coffee shop, illuminating our three faces. So similar, yet each marked by different choices, different burdens, different paths that had twisted and intersected in painful ways. We were a strange, unexpected trio. The daughter who was a ward, now discovering her biological mother was her aunt. The sister who was also a cousin, grappling with betrayal and her own complicity. And the biological mother who was also an aunt, seeking connection after years of distance. We were messy, broken, and raw. I can't promise forgiveness, I said slowly, looking from Madison to Sarah, then back again, letting the weight of the words hang in the air. Not for all of it, not yet. There's too much hurt. Too much to process. We understand, they both said, their voices soft, accepting my honesty. But maybe, I continued, a small, genuine smile finally touching my lips, the first real smile in weeks, maybe we can try something new. Something honest this time, without the secrets, without the expectations. Like what? Madison asked, her eyes searching mine, a flicker of hope in their depths. Like being real family, I said. However that looks, no competition. No lies, no perfect facades, just us, figuring it out. Accepting who we are, what we've done, and what we can become, together if we can. I'd like that, Sarah said, squeezing my hand, her grip firm. Me too, Madison whispered, tears welling up again. But this time they seemed different, less about regret for getting caught and more about the painful possibility of something real. More than anything, my phone buzzed one final time on the table. Megan, FBI needs to meet again. Colton's naming names. Looks like he's trying to cut a deal by giving up more people. You okay? I looked at these women, my cousin who used to be my sister, my aunt who was now my biological mother, and my birth mother who was also my aunt, who had been a stranger until now. Each of us broken by the same lies, by the ripple effects of decades of secrets and resentment. Each of us choosing truth over the painful, destructive illusion of perfection that had defined my childhood. Yes, I texted back to Megan. I'm okay. Starting to be anyway. Because sometimes family isn't about who raised you, or who shares your blood, or who fits into a perfect picture. Sometimes it's about who stands with you in the rubble, acknowledging the destruction, ready to face the mess and build something new, piece by painful piece, based on honesty and acceptance. So, I said, picking up my coffee cup, raising it slightly in a silent toast to the uncertain future, to the long road ahead. Where do we start? With the truth, Sarah suggested, her eyes steady. With trying, Madison added, her voice still fragile but stronger than before. No, I shook my head gently, a sense of quiet certainty settling over me. The truth had been revealed. Forgiveness was a distant shore. We start with acceptance. Of who we are, each of us. Of what we've done, each of us. And of what we can become. Together, if we're brave enough to try. The morning light grew stronger, washing away the shadows of our past. Of the old house filled with secrets. Of the ballroom shattered by truth. Of the years of living a life built on a foundation of lies. We weren't perfect. We weren't even whole yet. There was immense pain, difficult conversations, and legal battles ahead. But we were real. And maybe, just maybe, facing that reality together was the first true act of building something that could finally stand strong.